This is the first of several lessons that will focus on models, interpretations, approaches developed by social scientists in an effort to better understand discrimination and prejudice. In this lesson, we'll look at two models that have been developed by social psychologists. Social psychology is an interesting hybrid, a combination of both sociology and psychology. They kind of go in this hybrid beyond being just kissing cousins. Let's look initially at what is sometimes referred to as the symbolic model or the symbolic perspective. As you can notice there, this approach argues that prejudices may develop in part because people literally see in the members of another group or category something that they hate, fear, and or envy. As a possible working example, anti-Semitism, fear, loathing, hatred of Jewish ethnicity, may very well be linked in part, according to this model, to fears that some people have, dislikes that some people have about anyone who is Jewish. More often than not, this reflects stereotypes. They're pushy, they're preoccupied with power, they're money grubbers. Or on the other hand, it could in part be out of envy, because they seem to have really good business sense. In part two, the model might be used to argue that Jews are stigmatized in part because of the fact that they were responsible for the death of Jesus. What's conveniently overlooked here is that Jesus himself was a Jew. Now, one of the key elements of this particular model, a way by which and through which sometimes people eliminate or at least reduce a great deal of their anxiety, is the process known as projection. You might literally think of an old reel-to-reel film projector here. The basis for this is that people deny their unwanted traits, things they dislike about themselves, and they seek these in other people. So we literally project onto other people behaviors and feelings we're unwilling to accept in ourselves. Although this might be a bit of a stretch, it more or less works in this way. This is the mother and the daughter. So I hate myself. There's something about me I dislike, so I hate you. There are lots of examples that you most likely can come up with here to illustrate this particular model or approach. Someone who grew up in, for example, a home where he or she's constantly reminded of the evils of homosexuality, and then later in life may become aware of the fact that this may be who they are, overcome by fear, shame, anger. They may literally again project this unwanted trait onto people who openly acknowledge the fact they're gay. Then this gives the person an opportunity to go out and literally again strike out at these particular people. An interesting historical application of projection relates back to the long-established stereotype that African American males are uninhibited when it comes to their sexuality, and that they desire more than anything else to have sex with white women. There's some historical evidence to suggest that a great deal of this kind of prejudicial attitude emerged during the era of slavery. It was a time of rather rigid, puritanical sexual moral codes. And in actuality, who was having sex with whom? It was white owners and white overseers having sex with some of their female slaves. Now, some of these men, feeling again the sting of the fact that they were violating moral expectations, projected, according to some historians, their own lust onto the male black slaves. But again, the idea behind projection is we've got something about ourselves we dislike. So we literally, again, project that onto others. Again, pretty much like an old film projector. Now, the frustration aggression model is one that probably a number of you, if not most of you, are familiar with. Prejudices result from frustration, tension, that comes about because someone is unable to achieve a desired goal. They can't really get at the real source of their problem. So they take out their frustration in an angry way on someone else, someone who might be available, someone who might be present. Works a little bit like this. Now, what's interesting about this model is that it highlights yet another form or technique or procedure that we use to reduce anxieties. It's referred to as displacement. More often than not, we look for someone to blame. And usually that's a scapegoat. Now, these are some key characteristics of scapegoats identified by Allport. The best scapegoats, and by the way, scapegoating comes from a practice by the ancient Hebrews, where often each year in a village, a goat was collected, and all of the sins of the members of the community were piled on the back of that goat. And it was then driven out into the wilderness, taking with it all of the sins of the villagers. Scapegoats, the best ones, the most effective ones, are easily recognizable. They stand out in the crowd. You can easily distinguish them. You don't want to have to go looking for them. Closer at hand, the better. And if they're already in some form or fashion unpopular, that makes them more effective. And more often than not, what's the source of that unpopularity? Well, they personify something that's bad, something that's considered evil or despised. But above all, it's this last characteristic that's the most significant. The most efficient and effective scapegoats don't have any power. They can't fight back. Well, the Nazi government in Germany in the 1930s completely disenfranchised German Jews through a series of laws collectively known as the Nuremberg Laws. It took away from German Jews the right to vote, to hold office. Their property was confiscated. That made it much easier, because they were powerless, to literally again gather them up and put them first in ghettos and then later in concentration camps. Now, each of these models has some application. But if you go back to the symbolic model or perspective, one of its primary weaknesses is it's really difficult to find verifiable evidence to support it. On the other hand, as to the frustration aggression model, bear in mind that frustration doesn't automatically lead to aggressive responses, nor do people automatically displace aggression on scapegoats. And the model might work, or at least some argue, it's most applicable, most efficient to intra-group conflict if there is a subordinate cultural, racial, or ethnic group or category at hand. In the next lesson, we'll begin an examination of several sociologically based models of prejudice and discrimination.